Hello, hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our Made with Love mini-series. My name is Leah. I am your moderator, and Craftsy, Creative Cake Design, National Sewing Circle, and Creative Crochet Corner have all teamed up to provide a week of live demonstrations and a bundle of 5 free patterns and recipes. They are perfect for gifting your loved ones on Valentine's Day, and we want you to make sure to download your free patterns by clicking the link in the description. Now, once you get to the patterns page, make sure to click the picture of the project you'd like to download. Every day this week, we've got a new instructor. We're going live streaming through crafting, sewing, crocheting, baking, and decorating. You'll be getting these step-by-step demonstrations of all of the adorable Valentine's Day projects. And if you have any questions during the event, please leave your comments in the blue chat box below or into the chat on Facebook and YouTube. I will be monitoring those comments during the event. We'll get your questions in as they come if they pertain to today's project, but always, if you have a more general question, we like to get to those if there's time at the end as well, so don't be afraid to drop those in. I see some hellos already in the chat box. People are excited about today's project. So that means that without further ado, it's time to bring on today's instructor. We have our master pastry chef, Colette Christian, with us today. Hello and welcome, Colette. Thank you for being here. I would love for you to start us out by telling us just a little bit about you, and then also intro today's project. What are we making today?
Well, just to jump into what we're doing today, and then I'll bring you up to speed on my adventures, Leah. We are making a two-tone marshmallow, vanilla and raspberry. So please, everyone, download the recipe so that you can follow along. Now, this is going to be a bit of an adventure because I'm going to make both layers at the same time. So full disclosure, we might have a couple minutes with both mixers running, and I think I have it worked out where I can still keep answering questions while that's happening, but I just wanted to let you guys know a little bit of noise in the middle. So let's get started. I wanted to show you the finished result before we got started with the work. All right. And Leah, just to answer your question quickly, I am doing fabulous. I'm working on some great new projects that I'm really excited about. And everyone, I've debuted my own show, 12 noon, every Saturday on Instagram Live. My Instagram is the name of it's there. Anyway, Katie, our behind the scenes person, has that for you guys. Our wonderful Katie. And yeah, I answer your baking questions. So please follow me on Instagram and you'll get the deets. But now we're gonna get started with our marshmallows. First of all, pan prep. Now there's a couple things. The great thing about marshmallows is they're really easy to make if you have a stand mixer. And probably the pans you already have in your baker's pantry. In other words, you're probably all set to do this. You don't need anything unusual to make these beautiful marshmallows. They are delicious. They taste so fresh, and we'll be incorporating fresh raspberry puree. Well, no, that's a lie. Frozen raspberry puree that we make, so easy peasy, just from a bag of frozen raspberries, into our marshmallow. So nothing artificial, just lovely and fresh. All right. So when you look at the promo photos for our class today, you'll see the marshmallows are on the thick side. And in the recipe, it says use an 8 by 8 inch pan. And that's what this is. Most of us have one of these. And I have lined it one way with parchment paper that I've lightly sprayed with pan spray. If you don't want to use pan spray, put vegetable oil on a paper towel and just grease the pan that way. But greasing, these are sticky, so we need to grease our pans and our parchment paper. The parchment paper will help lift out our marshmallows. But you could also use a pan like this. This is a quarter sheet pan, which is 13 by 9 inches which is what I did for the batch that I showed you, if you want them a little thinner. Now you might say, well, Colette, I don't have this pan. But you might have a 13 by 9 inch glass Pyrex. Use that. It's really easy. The pan will determine the thickness. All right. So the batch we're making, we're going to go use our 8 by 8. So I'm going to get that out of the way. All right. These marshmallows use gelatin. And it's just plain old Knox gelatin, nothing fancy. Sometimes it comes in a big container, sometimes it comes in packets. The recipe calls for each layer gets 15 grams of gelatin. So if you've got the package, you'll use 2 packages because here's a fact, there's 7 grams of gelatin in each of those little packages. 1 gram plus or minus is not going to make that much of a difference. Just make sure you tap all that gelatin out of the packet because we need all of it. Okay, so the cool thing about these, and I don't want to confuse you because I'm going to do them side by side. Reading the chat, she will stop me to clarify, okay? All right. So what's really cool about gelatin is it's a 2-stage process. We need to bloom it or hydrate it in cold liquid. For the vanilla bean layer or the vanilla layer, I'm using cold water. For the raspberry layer, we're using raspberry puree and a little water, all right? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just sprinkle our gelatin on top of the liquid. And again, a little tandem baking here. It's much better when you're working with gelatin to have the liquid in the bowl and the gelatin on top instead of trying to pour the liquid onto the dry gelatin. I'm just going to stir it to submerge the gelatin, and we're going to let that sit. Now, I hope the recipe is not confusing. I tried to write it as clearly as possible. There, for some ingredients, you'll see water 1, and then further down the recipe list, you'll see water 2. That's correct. It'll all be clear. Now, not everyone likes to work with gelatin, and if you want to make vegan marshmallows, that's kind of another demo. We could work on that. It can be done. For now, we're just going to stick with old-fashioned marshmallows. Just take the spoon and poke it. I don't know what else to say. We're going to set these aside for a few minutes while they set up. I have the best kitchen in the world. It's so small, I can reach everything. All right, the next thing we're going to do, so let's recap. We have bloomed our gelatin in cold liquid. For the vanilla layer, it's water. For the raspberry layer, it's a combination of our raspberry puree, which I actually made last night and kept it overnight in the refrigerator, a little bit of water, and the gelatin. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what is in the mixer bowl. You'll notice that this is corn syrup, Caro syrup, and I'm gonna address that in just a second. Not very many marshmallow recipes call for 2 separate corn syrups or Caro syrups, but this, if we do it this way, then this the corn syrup actually helps cool down our sugar mixture, our sugar syrup mixture, and gets us to our marshmallow consistency more quickly. So that's the method behind my madness, doing it this way.
Colette, I have a question for you that just came in. User Danny Boy is curious what you mean when you use the term set up.
Oh, it's going to, excellent question, Danny. It's going to solidify, all right? And you can see it, it's just in what, 2 minutes? I'm not gonna turn it upside down because that could be a problem, but you can see it becomes somewhat semi-solid, all right? And that's depending on how much liquid you've bloomed your gelatin in, that determines the stiffness of the mixture, okay? So this looks great. And then so does this one. This one looks like raspberry applesauce. We're totally on point. All right. So we have corn syrup 2 in the mixer bowl. And then I have 2 pots behind me with our sugar syrup. We're gonna cook this sugar syrup to 236 degrees to 240 degrees Fahrenheit, otherwise known as softball sugar. It's a great idea to have a good candy thermometer whenever you're making any confections or candies in your home kitchen. I have provided a link to my personal favorite. The old-fashioned ones, kind of maybe your grandma had or your great-grandma had, they tend to go out of calibration pretty quickly. So I'm really in love with the thermometer that is digital, but still can hook on to the side of the pot. All right, sorry, just could talk about thermometers all day long. All right, what's in the pot is water, sugar, corn syrup, and salt, all right? So now I can hear the wheels turning. Another corn syrup? Yes. In fine candy making and confection production, corn syrup is the doctor, literally the doctor. And what it does is it helps the sugar not crystallize, not only when we're cooking our sugar syrup, but as our candies sit in storage, as they are being transported or mailed to our loved ones, because that's the whole point of today, is to make some beautiful marshmallows for the people we love. They'll stay. The sugar will not revert to its grainy stage. All right. Before I go on to start cooking sugar and melting our solidified gelatin, I want to talk a little bit about corn syrup, because corn syrup has a really bad rap. When I taught on ground before the pandemic, and I had a recipe with corn syrup in it, every hand would go up like, oh my God, we don't want to use corn syrup. It's bad for us. Well, Caro syrup in particular is labeled no high fructose corn syrup. So Caro syrup is corn syrup that's 100% glucose. Now, we're not going to eat marshmallows morning, noon, and night. You know, it's something that's consumed hopefully in moderation. The high fructose corn syrup that is in so much of our processed food, they take the glucose and they convert some of it to fructose. And in the whole science world, that's what can set us up for some really bad health problems if we take too much of it, okay? I hope that clears things up. Look for the little, they'll say no high fructose, and Caro syrup is the one to buy.
All right, Colette, I'm also going to ask you anything that you would like to feature for our viewers. The front camera is actually catching things a lot better than the side camera. So if there's any details you want to make sure that we see, go ahead and show it to the front camera. I think it's focusing just a little bit better right now.
Okay, so just so you guys, is that better?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Leah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm my own production team, you guys. Sometimes it gets a little interesting. All right. So now I'm going to start cooking my sugar syrups. And again, we're having an adventure. We're working both layers at the same time. I have 2 mixers ready to go. It's actually kind of fun. I thought of this demo because I thought it'd be so wonderful, and I love marshmallows. And then I had to work out the logistics. Okay, so we'll be fine. So now, and one thing about setting up the sugar syrup that's really, really important, and you won't see this in a lot of recipes that ask you to make a softball sugar or a caramel. If there's water, if they're asking you to use a little water, put the water in the pot first. That way, you won't have as much sugar spray up the side of the bowl, and you won't have to take a pastry brush that you've dipped in water to brush down the sides. That's a little trick I learned from master sugar artist Ewald Notter. He's like, it's amazing what that man does. So I pass that on to you guys. Even if the recipe says sugar first, put the water in first, then the sugar, and then the doctor, or corn syrup, on top. All right. So softball, 236 to 240. And while our sugar is beginning to cook, I'm going to pop the gelatin in the microwave for about 30 seconds to melt it. Leah, any questions?
We don't have any questions that have come in, but we do have quite a bit of excitement over this recipe. Dawn has not made marshmallows before. Constance is looking forward to this. I think Maria has downloaded the recipe with excitement. Everyone's really excited to give this a try. Vivian too. So this is a good one. I think you've hit on something new for a lot of our viewers, marshmallows.
That was my hope. And the other thing that's really exciting is once you learn the technique, you don't have to make them raspberry. You can make them any fruit flavor.
Yes, we got some more excitement going in. A question did just pop in here. Can we use pure glucose instead of corn syrup?
Great question, and the answer is yes. Glucose is a little more refined than corn syrup. Sometimes it's refined from potatoes instead of corn, but they are interchangeable. That will work just fine.
And then one more popped in, but do you need to show something else right now?
Yes, I just want to show you I have liquefied the gelatins. They are going in the mixer on top of the corn syrup number 2.
Okay, and I know you briefly touched on this already, Colette, but Joy wanted to know specific to allergies. So Joy has an allergy to corn products and byproducts. So is there any substitute for corn syrup, or would this veer us, like you mentioned, into kind of a completely different way to approach marshmallows?
If you could get a glucose that's refined from potatoes, I think you'd be okay. Mm-hmm. But please, always read those labels and product specs carefully. It would have to be 100% pure. And in the industry that produces corn syrups and glucose, sometimes I just lost my thought. I'm so sorry. Sometimes they actually cut, they'll mix corn and potato, so be very careful. All right, everybody. So now we're going to check our sugar here. Oh. We're getting there. I'm going to show you two ways to test for sugar. One is with the thermometer. I like this thermometer because it beeps when you get to the right temperature.
Colette, is there a difference? Deborah wants to know if there's a difference in temperature if you're working at the altitude of 5,000 feet.
No, not for this, not for this, Deborah. And I can say that emphatically because all my Craftsy classes were shot in Denver.
Mm.
And the only thing that gave me trouble were the madeleines. In miniature French desserts, I had to make a high altitude adjustment for them, but I cooked a lot of sugar. If you look at any of my classes, they're pretty crazy. I mean, I did some nutty stuff. All right, so what I'm doing is if you don't have a candy thermometer, you can take a paper clip, dip it in the sugar, and blow bubbles. Now I know I've done that before, that's not new, but there may be some of you viewing who are like, oh, okay. All right, now I'm gonna attach, my sugar is ready. I'm gonna start the mixers. Medium speed.
Now, Colette, Danny Boy was wondering why you are using two mixers. Any other reason than speed or convenience?
Oh, just absolute 100% speed and convenience at the same time. And I'm going to turn the mixers up. Now I did make an adjustment, and we're going to talk about that on the other side of the mixing. So going to high speed. Up. You guys, I'm so sorry, but I can't plug in my headphones. So just hold tight.
Colette, can you hear me well?
Huh?
Are you able to hear me?
Am I able to do what?
To hear me.
I can hear you, and if you can hear me, I can answer questions.
Yes, I think we can do that. Let's go ahead and go back to the bubbles that you were blowing. Can you tell us again what the reason was for that?
In case you don't have a candy thermometer, you can test for 240 sugar by taking a paper clip and blowing that bubble. So what happens is the sugar will be boiling, completely dissolved. As the bubbles start to get small, the sugar is still clear. Dip your paper clip in there. Oh, and see if it, one, coats the paper clip so you can then blow a bubble out of the paper clip.
All right. And then the other thing I wanted to do while you're just waiting here, we've got people, I think, joining even if they weren't with us at the top of the hour. Remind us a little bit about, you built this recipe, right? And I will remind you too, if you're viewing, you can get that recipe by the link in the description. Go ahead and click on the picture and you'll be able to download this recipe. So Colette, you created this recipe, right? What did you have in mind when you created it? I might have lost Colette for a moment there. So go ahead, and if you have any questions yourself as a viewer, I would like to encourage you to drop them in. We're getting close to about halfway through our time here together, so it does seem like we'll probably have time for some more general questions at the end, but also if you have questions for Colette as she's going through this demonstration, drop that into the chat box and we'll get to them as we have time. All right, back to Colette.
So the vanilla is almost finished. The raspberry or fruit layer always takes longer. So I'm going to add the vanilla extract to the vanilla layer, and I'm going to mix for a few more minutes. We're almost ready to pan up. All right, Leah, I'm one mixer down, so you guys can probably hear me better. So one thing about working with marshmallows, they're super sticky. So what you need to do is oil or spray your tools when you are getting the marshmallow batter out of the mixer bowl. All right. Even let this go until it was fluffier, but for time, I'm going to pan it up now. So I have my sprayed bowl scraper. Oh, one thing. Oh, that's such a relief. You guys have been so patient with me. I appreciate it. So in the recipe, you'll see that there is a mix of cornstarch and powdered sugar. I think it's 113 grams of powdered sugar and 85 grams of cornstarch that I have sifted together. And because I've been making a lot of marshmallows, I've stored in a little container. You'll see it's labeled marshmallow mix. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to sprinkle it over the bottom of my pan. All right. And then my spray bowl scraper, you can use a spatula, whatever you have. And I'm going to pour the mix out of the bowl. All right. Get rid of that. The raspberry layer needs a little bit more time. And you can also, if you like, for your fruit layer, if you're like, I want that a little bit pinker, you can add a few drops of food color. Just to brighten up that pink. I think raspberry is my new favorite color. And then the second layer goes on top. Make sure everything is mixed in. Now, if it weren't so loud, I would have mixed these just a little bit longer. But I want to show you something else you can do. You've got your 2 layers. I'm sure you're already way ahead of me. You can marble these. Isn't that cool? Put it in the chat if you think marbling them is cool. You can do 2 distinct layers, or you would take like an offset spatula or a kitchen knife, and you would begin to just swirl. Just pull that through. That's going to be pretty. Ooh, you guys, it's fabulous. All right. Now these are going to sit for 4 hours before cutting. And you know what I do? I get them out of the kitchen. Usually, like if you have a dining room or a family room, a little less, as well, the driest room in your house. I usually, I just stick mine in my little dining room. Marshmallows are always stored at room temperature. And because if you put them in the fridge, the sugar will attract moisture and you'll have a mess. All right. Leah, I can take questions.
We actually do have a few that have come in, so let's knock them out right here. So you mentioned that if for the noise, you would have kept your stand mixers going a little longer. What would be a good way to know for our viewers when they should be finished mixing?
Super thick and fluffy. Super thick, and there's a time. What I want you guys to do, because you're not trying to do what I'm trying to do. You're going to set a timer, and you're going to let the mixer go at high speed. I believe it's 5 minutes. Then for the vanilla layer, you add the vanilla. You go 2 more minutes. If you're adding food color, you add the food color, and you go 2 more minutes. You might have to scrape down a little bit with the food color. You might have to stop the mixer and scrape down with the vanilla. Spray your spatula if you're scraping down, because this is going to stick to everything. And I don't want you to need Serve Pro to come in and clean your kitchen after you've made this batch of lovely marshmallows.
All right, one more question about mixers here. This one comes from Carmen, but I'm sure Carmen is not alone in wondering this. How would we go about doing the 2 flavors when you only have 1 mixer?
Oh, well, for most of my life, I only had 1 mixer. So I would do 1 layer, and then I would do the other layer. As a matter of fact, all the tests of this recipe, that's how I did it. But in order to stay in our time frame and actually be able to show you both layers, I had to do 2 mixers. Now, for for part of my life, I teach for an online culinary school called Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. And during the pandemic, I shot 42 videos for them in my kitchen because they needed more curriculum. They needed more. And so that's why I have more mixers, is because of my video production.
Okay, we do have a few more questions. I'll leave this up to you, Colette, if you'd like to move on to the next step or take a couple more questions.
Oh, what I'm gonna do, full disclosure, I am going to dust my work surface. Now you would use a cutting board, but I'm gonna actually work on my marble because it's pretty. So you're gonna dust your cutting board with your marshmallow mix. And if you have a little strainer like this, oh my God, it's like Romper Room. Anybody remembers Romper? You're going to use it a lot for your marshmallow production, And these are easy to find. I think I picked this up at the 99-cent store. All right. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these, and I've sprinkled cornstarch and I sprinkled the marshmallow mix on the top. Now, another big noise, okay? They come right out of the pan, and then we're gonna peel this parchment off on a diagonal. Ooh, doesn't that look just sexy, you guys? I mean, I'm sorry, they're so pretty. It's like Paris. So the French are really good at marshmallows. They call them guimauve. And they make all sorts of gorgeous shapes and flavors. And I'm always jealous when I've been in Paris and looking in candy shops. But now we can make our own. So now I've got my marshmallow mix. And as I said, you can make different purees. You can buy purees. If you have Goya makes passion fruit, oh, I will learn to speak, I promise. Passion fruit puree, and they make a mango puree. They're very reasonably priced. They're in the freezer section, and they work great. Because it's not always Valentine's Day. Well, maybe for you. Honestly, I'm terrible at romance, but I live the most romantic life. All right, so now, Leah, fire away with questions.
Okay, let's go. First, Lisa was curious about the gelatin use. Is it possible to substitute agar instead of gelatin?
No, not easily. And I was kind of ready for that. For a vegan, for a non-gelatin, I have it right here. You would want to look up recipes that use genutine. That would be GENUTINE, which is a form of carrageenan and locust bean gum. You also need something called soy isolate. And I think that's it. But what I would recommend is maybe do an internet search on that. If you have any questions about what you come up with, you can always get a hold of me. I'll be more than happy to answer those questions.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, can I ask Lacey's question real quick here?
Sure.
I think Lacey is asking about back when we were talking about how you would know that you were done with the stand mixing. So when you're talking about that texture, how would you compare it to marshmallow fluff? Like the kind that you can get in the store, just in the jar? How does the texture compare?
Pretty much what I pulled out of the mixer so our eardrums didn't burst is marshmallow fluff. So what you'd want to do is take it you got to take it a few minutes longer. And honestly, best thing to do is to set you're at full speed mixing, set your timer. And then also your mixers have different, a mixer will have, sometimes the motor is strong, some are stronger than others. So what you want to do is you're looking for it to look like, very, very, like marshmallow fluff 2.0. All right. It's almost you can almost turn the mixer over without it sliding out of the bowl. Does that help?
I'll keep an eye and see if there's any more details that she or anybody else might want. A couple of the questions that have now come in are about either the cutting stage or after the cutting stage. So I'm going to let you demonstrate that, and then we'll get back to those questions.
Okay, so I've sprayed my knife. I have my ruler. Marshmallows are typically cut like 1 by 1 inch, but you're the chef in your kitchen. You can do whatever you want. And so I'm just going to cut, I'm going to cut some. I'm going to cut 2. Let's see. And you might have to respray your knife. Oh, and by the way, should you pull your marshmallow mixture a little bit sooner because, of whatever reason, it's still going to firm up. That gelatin is still going to go right to work. They may be a little softer in texture, but they will be delicious. So you guys can see here, I have 2 strips of marshmallows. And if you have invested, the other tool you can use, I talk about this, I feel almost every demo, it's a 5-wheel pastry wheel. And you can mark with this in addition to cutting your croissants, or you take your yardstick, which you have purchased at the paint store, and cut in half, and you just cut. And if you have to spray your fingers, spray your fingers. And you can also, like I said, you can use, if you don't want to use pan spray because it's not the best for the environment by any stretch of the imagination, and I'm normally ranting about it, but God, it's really helpful when you're making marshmallows. Also, when the marshmallows are slightly soft and coming out of the mixer bowl, you can pipe them. So the possibilities are really endless for marshmallows. Any questions, Leah?
We do have a few here. Let's go to Amy's. Amy is curious when the marshmallows are cut. Should you use cornstarch or powdered sugar to keep them from sticking together, especially if you're giving them as gifts?
The mixture, Amy, is the best mixture for that is a combination of powdered sugar and cornstarch. Cornstarch isn't the most pleasant to eat. So for the marshmallow mix in the recipe for today's class, it's 1 part powdered sugar to 3 parts cornstarch, sifted together and then stored. And yeah, it keeps forever. The marshmallow mix keeps absolutely forever. Now, what you're going to do, and that's a very good question because we don't want them to stick, and I have to just go in my cupboard for a minute. And I'm going to actually, whoa, I almost dropped it on the floor. That would have been crazy. And I've got some of the marshmallow mix in the bowl, and I'm going to toss them a few marshmallows at a time, and then I'm going to put them in my strainer. If you make these with kids, there's going to be ingredients everywhere. Take pictures because it's going to be so joyous. Then you put the marshmallows in the strainer and you tap out the excess sugar. And look, you guys, they don't even stick to each other. So that's the way you do that. Now, in a restaurant, let's say like in a fine dining restaurant, I'm just thinking going down memory lane to when I worked in places like that, we'd often make marshmallows for miniardises, that little candy, the little plate of candies that gets presented with the bill. And we would keep our fresh marshmallows in a cool, dry place for about 7 to 10 days. After that, they were still food safe, but after about 7 to 10 days, because they don't have the preservatives that our store-bought marshmallows have, they will lose their luster. So if you send them or you gift them, just like your macarons, those of you who are macaron mavens, it's really recommended that these are consumed within 3 to 5 days for maximum deliciousness.
While you're talking about storing, we do have a question about that as well. This was from Ilyana. And Ilyana is curious, once made, are you able to store the cut marshmallows in the fridge? And if so, for how long would you do that?
Okay, Ilyana, great question. They never go in the fridge, ever, ever. Because sugar has this property, you guys, where the big word for it is hygroscopic. And what that means is sugar attracts moisture. Now, you may not think of it every day because we probably don't have deep thoughts about our refrigerator, but our refrigerators are full of humidity so that our food doesn't dry out. So the sugar begins to latch on to that humidity, and they would literally weep. They would cry. So no refrigerator for marshmallows, which makes them kind of nice to send. Oh, by the way, you can, while it's still soft and pipeable, you can use them as a filling for macarons. And that's really kind of lovely too. I don't know, I got macarons on the brain. If anybody else does.
We have a couple people about the piping actually asking, first of all, is it possible to pipe them? And if so, how do you keep it from running? And then also, what is piping? So if you could talk about what you mean when you say piping.
Sure, great question. So let's just go right to the basics. What is piping? So if I were going to pipe these marshmallows either into molds or into shapes, I would use probably a plain round tip, anything from an 803 to an 806 plain round tip. And I would use a piping bag, and I would drop the tip in the piping bag and then fill the bag halfway with the marshmallow mixture. And then what you want to do is you want to just, well, there's a couple things you can do, and I apologize for not being set up better for this to show you on camera, but you can, when you put the tip in the bag, you can take your thumb and push some of the bag into the tip, load in your mixture, and that will stop it from running out the tip until you are ready to pipe. You can also pipe your marshmallows into silicone molds. That's a lot of fun. You just dust them with the marshmallow mix and then pipe them in. You can pipe little honeycombs. At Easter time, you could tint them yellow, and you could make your own peeps. So that would be like totally fun. Any other questions, Leah?
We have got quite a list of some questions here that we're going to try to get through with the time we have remaining, but I also want to make sure to give you the time to show any other steps that you'd like to finish with.
Okay, I'm going to finish quickly with packaging. I think the best way to package them is in like a really cute treat bag, which is not this. But as you know, the craft stores always have cute little treat bags. This is one of my favorites, green with the rose. And all you do is just bag them up. And then you can give them to the people you love. And they are just so yummy. And in hot chocolate, fantastic. If you could make one of those mason jar mixes of hot chocolate mix and put a pretty ribbon on it, give a bag of marshmallows, and you have made someone's day. Trust me. All right, Leah, I think that's it.
Perfect. Most of our questions that have come in, at least recently, are a little bit more general. So we're just going to get to them in the order that I see them in the chat box. We're going to start with Constance. Constance is curious if you can purchase some raspberry puree. You talked about some other flavors. Can you also purchase the raspberry puree?
Absolutely. So the raspberry puree, the company is out of Napa. I believe Amazon carries it. The company's name is Perfect Puree. Perfect Puree. They will send you frozen purees. They come frozen. It's a beautiful product. Some of the flavors are a little on the pricey side, but it does certainly save you time. One quick note about frozen fruit. I have on the recipe, there's right out of the gate, I tell you how to make your own fruit purees. But the thing about frozen fruit that's so cool is that it is picked the day that it's most perfect and then processed. So when you buy frozen fruit, it's always like frozen in time, at the height of its perfection.
All right. And so for those of our viewers that are making their own puree, Kendra is curious. It's just raspberries, sugar, and water in a pot. Is that correct?
That's it. And all you want to do is just for a very short time. I think in the recipe, I said no more than 2 minutes. And then I put it in a little food processor. If you have a stick blender, your blender, you might make your smoothies in. You just whirl it and then you strain it. So for this project, everyone, a strainer is pretty important. I would say that's kind of a key piece of equipment. It would be, you know, like this little guy from the dollar store. Perfect. Even bigger. I was kind of wishing he was bigger earlier today. So,
all right, we've got a specific step for our next question here. This comes from Paula. So Paula has made marshmallows before. The recipe is similar, but it does not ask to warm the bloomed gelatin before adding and mixing the sugar. Does warming it provide a purpose? Does it change the final texture? What would you say?
I feel it smooths out the final texture of the marshmallow, because many recipes have you start with blooming the gelatin in the mixer bowl. And then you pour you kind of get things going. There's no separation of the two corn syrups. You begin, and so what you're relying on to dissolve your gelatin, because gelatin is a two-step thing. We hydrate it or bloom it. Bloom was the scientist who figured out gelatin. That's why we call it blooming. And then we have to dissolve it with hot liquid. So by zapping it in the microwave and then throwing it on the second batch of corn syrup to kind of cool it down, we liquefy it, and there's no chance of grit. Make sense? Yes?
Okay, I'll keep an eye on any further comments on that. Hopefully that was a good explanation of the reasoning behind that. Let's move to A. Sester. Next is curious if there is a way to make a chocolate marshmallow or any other non-fruit flavor. What would that look like?
That would require adding cocoa powder to the mix. And what you could try it with the vanilla layer, and you would add, I have my formula here. So in general, cocoa is a funny, and you would want to use a good Dutch processed cocoa, not like Hershey's breakfast cocoa, but actually Hershey's makes a really good one that's in just about every supermarket. And believe me, I'm a Dutch processed cocoa snob from way back, but this is great. Hershey's Special Dark. Grams of cocoa, 125 grams of the granulated sugar. And the cocoa would go in, it wouldn't go into the syrup. I would probably add it. Leah, I kind of have to think about that. I would probably add it. I'd probably put it in the mixer with the cornstarch and bloom gelatin, turn the mixer on, and pour the hot syrup over everything and let her rip. I wish we had more time. I'd whip it up right now.
All right, keeping in with our flavors, Laura wants to know if raspberry flavor would be too much with the puree.
You know, I thought about it, and I think it would be great. Just make sure you're using like a good raspberry extract or a non-oil, be careful, you guys, in the whole wonderful flavor world out there. When we're working with meringues of any stripe, we want to avoid oils. So just really read your labels. And if you have any liqueur, like a beautiful framboise on your bar cart, that would be a nice addition. And you could easily add up to 8 grams or 2 teaspoons of like the liqueur. And I would probably be a little careful with the extracts because they're stronger than liqueurs. I know that's a ridiculous statement, but they are. Liqueurs are more rounded out in their flavor, otherwise no one could ever drink them. So extracts, I'd probably start with 1 teaspoon or 4 grams. And you guys, you can always taste and you can add a little bit more. If you're like, oh, that's not raspberry enough. And if you want to hear something super exciting, I didn't do it for this demo, but if you have freeze-dried like strawberry or raspberry powder or freeze-dried or strawberry fruit that you can whirl in your little blender or mini food processor and pulverize, you can add that to flavor as well. And one last thing, I haven't tried it. It's a little chemical, but I'm thinking we can also flavor marshmallows with gelatin, like Jello powder. But we would have to, we would have to reduce the sugar, and I haven't worked that out yet.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, but before we get to it, could you repeat the amount of cocoa that you were recommending? I think we lost a little bit of audio there.
Okay, of course. So I'm looking at so what I would do for both formulas, the sugar is 155 grams. So I would take out 30 grams of sugar and I would add 30 grams of cocoa powder. So 125 grams of granulated sugar, 125 of sugar, 30 grams of cocoa powder, and then definitely hit it with some vanilla extract. You could even add a little coffee extract because coffee brings out the flavor of chocolate. You could make coffee marshmallows too. If you have a coffee lover in your life, then you could do that as well. And Leah, I just want to take a second and address a short change that I made. You have 2 options when you make your fruit layer. You can add the fruit puree to the gelatin as I did, or you can add it to the sugar syrup. If you add it to the sugar syrup, and that's the way it works in the formula, instead of cooking your sugar to 236, you're going to stop at 221. And that's all spelled out for you in the recipe. Any questions? You can always find me on Instagram, Baking W Colette. And any final questions, Leah?
I think we can get just one more in. I'm going to try to combine because 2 of them are about gelatin. So 2 questions. The first one, can you substitute the powder gelatin with gelatin sheets? And the second one is, can you use fish gelatin?
Fish gelatin, no. Gelatin sheets, yes. So here's and I don't mean to be, sometimes I'm just like, so no, and I don't like being like that. For the fish gelatin, if I haven't worked that out so it doesn't taste fishy, then I'm not going to, or have an aftertaste of any kind, then I'm not going to endorse it until I've tested it. Because my thing is, I go through the testing and working things out. So when you have one of my recipes, you are set up for success. So that's why that no came out a little strong. Haven't worked it out yet. The conversion for gelatin sheets to gelatin powder, 1 sheet of gelatin weighs 3 grams. So for this recipe, you would use 5 leaves of gelatin. You would soak them in super cold water, and then you would squeeze out all the excess before you just zapped them in the microwave to liquefy that gelatin. 30 seconds in the microwave, and that will liquefy your gelatin. And again, the benefit is texture. If you forgot and just threw the gelatin in your mixer bowl and then poured that hot sugar syrup on top, it will break down. It'll be okay. It'll be good. I was just going for great.
Okay, well, that's all the questions that we have time for. We do some Q&As sometimes with Colette. So Colette, I'd love for you to give us some final thoughts. Mostly, where can people find you? Is there anything you want them looking forward to that you'd like to share? And then I will close us off with a few reminders. But first, Colette.
Thank you so much. Well, I would, if you have baking questions, please tune in to my show on Instagram Live called The Dough Doctor. I'm live every Saturday at noon Pacific time for a half hour. That's Baking W Colette. And on Friday, I always post a call for questions. Of course, I do take questions live in the show. My website, which is packed with great recipes, is bakingwithcolette.com. You can find the recipes in the tab Recipes and Blog Posts. The Dough Doctor is also archived on my website. And I've just started the show. And as I was telling Leah and Katie before we went live, everyone, I really love this concept. And I would love to have you join me so that I can grow the show. So website or Instagram, please join me on Saturday, noon Pacific.
Well, thank you so much for today's demonstration, Colette. I just have a few reminders before we say farewell for the day. First of all, if you are out there and you are ready to make your marshmallows or really any of our projects from this week, we would love for you to share your projects with us and everyone on social media. And all you have to do is use the hashtag #ShareCraftsy. Again, that's the hashtag #ShareCraftsy if you make any of the projects from this mini series. Now, remember to join us tomorrow. We're closing out our final day of our Made with Love mini series, and tomorrow we're streaming live with Mr. Domestic. We're going to start that stream at 2 p.m. Central Time, and Mr. Domestic is providing a live demonstration on how to make the ooh la la denim heart pillows. You can download your free pattern for those right now using the link in the description before tomorrow's event. And you can also find the entire mini series schedule in the video description should you want to hop back and review any of this week's projects. So I'm very excited to see you again tomorrow for our final project. Until then, my name is Leah. On behalf of Colette and our entire team, thank you for joining us today, and we will see you tomorrow.